Hello again. I'm an Anglo-Saxon, both by genetic inheritance and also by instinctive loyalty to the culture in which I grew up. A DNA test revealed that I'm 90% English, Scottish and Irish with 10% German ancestry. To my mind, the perfect blend. I also uphold the principles of Anglo-Saxon civilisation, which brought the world out of darkness and gave other races and cultures all those useful things like modern medicine, smartphones, the internet, and buildings which are more than a single story in height. There is now a concerted attempt to destroy my country, both by physical invasion and psychological warfare upon the values which are central to it. Much of this is being done by treacherous members of my own nation, who are eager to help in the destruction of all that I hold dear. I fear that we are beginning an inexorable decline into barbarism, a new age of ignorance and folly. All this is, as you might say, the bad news. It is likely to be bad news for at least the next few centuries, but there might be light at the end of the tunnel, although none of us will live to see it. I say this because although I am today proud to call myself an Anglo-Saxon, at one time the Anglo-Saxons, although they were not called that at the time, were regarded as the epitome of barbarism and the people who were invading Britain and destroying its culture and civilization. I am, as I might perhaps have mentioned, currently writing a book on Roman London, which is due to be published next year. The chapter I am at work on now concerns the decline and fall of Roman civilization in this country. The Celts, who were the inhabitants of Britain when the Romans arrived, had adopted Roman ways and, after 350 years of Roman society, felt that they were doing very well. People in the cities spoke Latin and there was a very decent civilization. Then the Saxons began coming across the Channel and landing in this country without so much as a by your leave. They were barbarians with no real civilization to speak of, no cities, many of them illiterate and unfamiliar with the way things were done in Britain. They began taking over the country, and they were so successful that the Romans left and the Celts were at first a minority and then driven away from the land entirely. So they retreated to Wales. And so it was that this part of Britain became known as England, Angleland. Thus began the Dark Ages, the years of ignorance, lack of sophistication, no culture, nothing at all to speak of. Of course, ultimately, we see that this was just what was needed for Britain. The British people living in what is now England had become decadent, and the infusion of vigorous newcomers and new blood was just what was needed to revitalise the country. From those dark ages grew the civilization of which I am so proud now. Anglo-Saxon culture, the pinnacle of intellectual achievement in the world. However, just as the Romans grew slack and decadent, so too has this culture of ours. We tolerate, celebrate even, things which no right-thinking person should ever allow. We too are finding that our country is being settled by those we regard as outsiders, and we dislike it, because we know that, like the Celts, we will be driven out of our own country. Those who are arriving now have no love for our culture. They don't wish to learn about our history. They want to destroy it and start from scratch, which is of course a grief for me. How though if this coming age were to prove a good thing in the long run? Could it be that from the overthrow of the Anglo-Saxon civilization a new culture will emerge, one very different from our own, but perhaps no worse for that? We are none of us likely to see this happen, but it might be a comfort to think that from the ruins of our civilization a new one might one day rise, one which might be as important as our own. Of course we cannot see this at the moment, nobody can envisage the future, but I think that just as the fall of the Roman world gave birth to the Anglo-Saxon civilization, so too something of the same kind might be in the process of happening right now.